اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. اطلب العلم أخي فهو درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. سل إماما عاش في العلم
the crisis of knowledge that we are currently going through is that the Prophet ﷺ did not spend time teaching people about things that they didn't need to, that didn't necessarily. When a verse of the Quran was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ would teach them the major implications of this verse and how they need to implement it. And we will all become seekers of knowledge. If we decide from today, believe me, Allah will open up the doors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up the doors. The Prophet
درب به نور، به ترقى به تحيا عالما حرا فخور. كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور. كن إذا سموك اسما لتكن مثل الحضور، كن رفيقا كن عظيما كن كما تلك صقور.
الحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Respected brothers, elders, and dear sisters, the subject that we were going to discuss in this session was the knowledge of the Sahaba. And I was thinking that perhaps I will speak a little bit about how the Sahaba sought knowledge, how they taught it, how they implemented it, what was their style of teaching and learning. However, I think because we have such a diverse crowd, it becomes necessary for us to first address the crisis of knowledge that we are currently going through. On one side, information is more plentiful than ever before. We have more tools and resources. We have more means of acquiring information than ever in human history. The internet, of course, being at the top of the list of resources that we refer to, we go to for the sake of acquiring knowledge and information. Yet, while the information is accessible, the style of acquiring the information, the style of implementing it, and the style of imparting it to others has drastically changed. I'm one of those people who believes that there is a great deal of good in preserving the tradition of Islamic scholarship. I personally believe that the knowledge of deen is something very sacred. It's not like learning math and science or the other worldly subjects. And the reason for that is because this knowledge has come directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sublime. He transcends every limitation, flaw, fault, mistake. So His knowledge is perfect and it's absolute. And He revealed this knowledge. The word frequently used in the Quran is anzala and nazzala. He sent it down. A direct descent onto the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many times through the medium of Jibreel alayhi salam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains in the Quran who is Jibreel. That he is trustworthy. He is very influential in the heavens. When he speaks, all the angels listen. And how he does not change the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anyways, to the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is the purest of hearts, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the angels to bathe and wash more than once. So the knowledge is very pure. This didn't have to be the case. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Tawrat pretty much as it was. In one revelation, you have the entire book in the form of these tablets. The Quran could have been revealed in the same way, but it wasn't. It was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, who is, according to our belief, the most perfect human being, the purest, the kindest, and the most worthy of this knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now let's look at his style of teaching it to others. So we have 23 years of seerah to understand how the Prophet ﷺ is teaching this knowledge. And many books have been written just to explain how the Prophet ﷺ imparted the knowledge revealed to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we find many things. The first thing we find is that the Prophet ﷺ did not spend time teaching people about things that they didn't necessarily need to know. When a verse of the Quran was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ would teach them the major implications of this verse and how they need to implement it. Many Sahaba tell us that we used to learn 10 verses at a time. While we were learning those 10 verses, we wouldn't learn anything else. And we would learn how to recite them. We would learn the halal and haram, the amr and the nahi, the commandments, the prohibitions. And once we had learned it, we moved on. Until then, no, we couldn't. When we go back to hadith and study those ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ is actually explaining the Quran, we find them to be very limited. Limited means that they are short, concise, to the point. They don't go off into all kinds of details and all kinds of explanations. He is telling people what they need to know, what is going to be a source of salvation for them. And we keep in mind the famous saying of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, that we learned Iman before we learned the Quran. He said, today I'm seeing people learning to read the Quran. They manage to read it very quickly and fluently. And they read it sometimes from beginning to end. They have no idea what the Quran is asking them to do, what kind of life the Quran wants them to live. And he says, us, we learned Iman first. And after learning Iman, the Prophet ﷺ taught us the Quran. Then the process was such that as our knowledge of the Quran increased, our Iman kept on increasing. So these three things were being learned simultaneously. Iman, ilm, and amal. There wasn't this theoretic phase where you're just learning the theory and then at some other point you're going to learn the practical application of it. It wasn't like this. And there wasn't this phase where first you learn the information and then later on or somewhere else you learn how to believe in this. And part of our crisis is that while the information is aplenty, there is a serious lack of conviction in that knowledge. Today, many people are picking up the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam just for the sake of comparing them to other things. It's just like another subject. They're comparing the beautiful words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the words of some philosopher, and some are just comparing one hadith to the other hadith. This hadith says this and this hadith says that, losing sight of the fact that if we continue to study hadith or the verses of the Quran themselves, our iman is actually going to become compromised. It's only a matter of time before the hearts are filled with doubts and confusions that can't be resolved. Why can't they be resolved? Because our approach is to self-teach ourselves. We want to self-learn Quran, self-learn Hadith, self-learn all of these things, and we feel we are equipped to do so. The Prophet ﷺ taught individuals, he taught groups, and while he is teaching them, he's also preparing future teachers. One Sahabi, Abu Tha'laba, radiallahu anhu, asked the Prophet ﷺ to send him to someone who could teach him. Someone who is a good teacher. The Prophet ﷺ sent him to Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah radiallahu anhu, and he said, I'm sending you to someone who is not only going to teach you, but they're also going to train you. They're going to teach you knowledge and they're going to teach you adab, respect, behavior, manners, how to conduct yourself. So another aspect now gets added to this list of 3 things. We said iman and ilm and amal. Now there's also something called adab. And if you want to learn about adab, pick up the lives of Sahaba. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma says that after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, I said to one of my friends that let's go to these senior Sahaba and acquire what we can from their knowledge. So he said, oh Ibn Abbas, do you really think anyone's going to come to you and ask you for knowledge and ask you for information while all of these great Sahaba are present? Who are you kidding? He said, I left him alone and I started going to these companions. Anyone that I heard has received a hadith directly from the Prophet ﷺ, I would go to him. And many times I would go and they would be resting and they would be occupied at that time. I would just sit down and wait in front of their house until they came out. And in the process, I would get covered with dust and sand, but I would wait. And when they would wake up or free themselves and come out, they would see me sitting there. They would feel embarrassed. They would say, oh cousin of Rasulullah ﷺ, you should have just sent someone to us. And he would say, no, I've come to learn something from you. I've come to gain something from you. I have heard that you have received such and such hadith. If you could please relate it to me. And they would relate whatever hadith they had. And this process continued. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu reached such a status in knowledge that some narrations mention that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu had an honor. He received an honor, a nobility that no one in Quraysh had received other than, of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said, how? He said, one day, people came. This is just one day. His student is describing an occasion that he happened to be present for. He said, I went to visit him, and the area outside his house was filled with people. And then beyond that, beyond the courtyard or the lawn or whatever it was, people had started overflowing into the streets. And all the streets around his house had become packed with people just sitting down, waiting to hear something from him. He said it became so congested that you couldn't get through to his house. He said, I managed to get around, and these are all people who are waiting patiently. They're not coming and asking him, they're just waiting for him to free himself up. He says, I went because he was his old student and old khadim. He said, I went and approached him, and I said that the people have come to learn from you. He said, okay. Get me some water for wudu. So he said, I got him some water. He performed wudu. And then he said, okay, I want you to announce that those people who have questions specifically about individual words of the Quran, they should all come in. Individual words, the meanings of words. So he says, I announced, and the whole house filled up, and the courtyard of the house filled up. The entire property is packed with people. And he said, okay, ask. People started asking, he started answering. They kept asking and he kept answering until this whole crowd is exhausted. He says, okay, ikhwanukum, now it's time for your brothers. You need to go and make room for the other people that are waiting outside. So he tells his khadim now, call those people who have questions about the tafsir of the Quran. Tell them to come in. So it's announced outside that anyone who has a question about tafsir should come. So the whole house and the area around the house completely filled up. They started asking and he began to answer. And when he was done, when they were done, he said, okay, now make some room for your brothers. These people got up and left, and he said, now you tell them that anyone who has a question about the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ should come. Another group came that filled up the entire house. They started asking him, he started answering. When they were satisfied that they had received answers to all their questions, he said, okay, please get up and leave, make room for the next group. And so he had announced that anyone who has a question pertaining to fiqh and ahkam, halal and halal, he should enter. And again, the house filled up, and he continued to answer their questions until they were finished. They had no more questions. He said, okay, you get up and leave. And then he had announced that anyone who has questions about fara'id, meaning the distribution of inheritance and estate, those people should come in. And another crowd came in, filling up the whole house. And they asked, and he answered and answered until they were done. And then he requests them to leave and make room for the next group. He says, anyone who has questions about the Arabic language, about the lugha, about adab, about shi'r, they should come in. And he did a whole session with them until this whole group had been exhausted and finished. When a person, and the people of his time are saying that this type of honor, this type of acceptance has not been seen in the history of the Arabs. So I put it very simply in the words of our Salaf. They used to say, ذَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا فَعَزَزْتُ مَطْلُوبًا. I remained humble as a seeker of knowledge. I lowered myself while I was learning knowledge. And after I was done, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me respect and honor, and He gave me this status. If we go into knowledge with our heads held high, and we're going to go and we're going to learn, and we're going to teach, and we want this and this and this, we go in expecting things. expecting respect from the first day. So, one poet says, أَرَى لَكَ نَفْسًا تَشْتَهِي أَن تُعِزَّهَا فَلَسْتَ تَكُونُ تُعِزُّهَا حَتَّى تُذِلَّهَا. I see that you desire, your inner desire is to raise and honor yourself, but I'm telling you, you will not do that until you first lower yourself. And another one says, العلم حرب للفتى المتعالي كالسيل حرب للمكان العالي. Knowledge is in fact something that brings destruction to a proud student, to an arrogant student, just like a flood brings destruction to every high monument and every high structure. So they learn how to lower themselves. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu was so humble. This is a man who at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death was hardly 14 years old. He was very young. But his intelligence, his knowledge was of the level that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu used to keep him with him in the majlis of Shura, where he would consult and discuss with the senior Sahaba. And there are many stories about this. But never once would he offer his opinion by himself. Never. And if ever Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu used to ask him, "Oh, Ibn Abbas, what's your opinion?" He would say, "Please, Amir al-Mu'mineen, I don't feel comfortable speaking until all my seniors have spoken. Until all of these shuyukh from the Sahaba have spoken. I will speak at the end. I'm nothing in front of them." Once, he had a question about the Quran, about the tafsir of the Quran, that he wanted to ask Umar radiallahu anhu. But he was just too shy. And he says it was the hayba, it was the awe of Umar. And Umar radiallahu anhu had this great awe. He wasn't easy to approach. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives this to those who are close to Him, to those who have only the fear of Allah and fear nothing else. Everything fears them. So he says, I had a question about the tafsir of a verse in Surah At-Tahrim. And for 2 years, I tried but could not muster the courage to go and ask him. Finally, on one occasion, we were traveling, and I found him to be alone, and I said, you know what, I have to ask him now. So he said, Amir al-Mu'mineen, there's a question I've been wanting to ask for 2 years, but I hesitate, I'm shy, it's your awe that doesn't allow me to get the courage to ask you. Umar radiallahu anhu said, why are you doing that? You don't have to do that. If you have a question, just ask me. If I know the answer, I'll give it to you. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know it. So then he asked him, who are the 2 women that are referred to in this ayat? Tadaharata, those 2 women that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in this story in Surah At-Tahrim. So he said, oh, that's Hafsa and Aisha radiallahu anha. So there is nearness, there is a bond, there's an intimacy, but there is a great deal of respect. There's a great deal of honor. So coming back to the original point, this knowledge is something very sacred. Sahaba radiallahu anhu took it very seriously. It was not something casual. They were working very, very hard. And they had created a culture whereby no one felt excused from learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from learning the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There were those people who had farms and ranches and things like that to tend to. So these people would take turns with others. One day you go and learn from the Prophet, the next day we're going to go. And when you come back, you'll share the information with me. When I come back, I'll share the information with you. This is what Umar radiallahu anhu used to do every single day. One day he's going, one day he's staying back. And he had this deal with his neighbor. That the day you go and come back, you're going to share the information. The day I go, when I come back, I'm going to share whatever I learned with you. Because people had, at that time, also obligations. They had careers and businesses and families and all of those things. It was a small, select few, just like it is today. There was a small percentage of people who completely freed themselves up only for the knowledge of deen. Like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The majority of them had their professions and businesses and commitments. But they also did not excuse themselves. There were some, like I said, their schedule was every second day they're going to the Prophet ﷺ and spending the whole day with him. And there were others who used to go, spend some time in the morning, and then spend some time in the evening. They were taking some lessons before they start their day, and then some lessons when they end their day. And then there were those who would come into Medina and live with the Prophet ﷺ for a fixed period of time. A month, or 2 months, or 3 months, or 4 months, or 5 months, and learn whatever they could possibly learn, and then go back to their villages, to their tribes, and educate them about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But no one felt excused. This is why Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu announced that no one will be allowed to do business in our marketplace until they have learned the fiqh of that business. Until they have learned the ahkam of that business. So it was a culture of knowledge. It was a culture where everyone was obliged to learn. And whatever people had, they were imparting that knowledge to others. It was a culture in which every man was bringing knowledge home to his family. Every Sahabi was educating his wife and children. In fact, Ali radiallahu anhu, in tafsir of this verse, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِكُمْ نَارًا, he says, عَلِّمُوهُم. When Allah says, save yourselves and save your families from fire, Ali radiallahu anhu says, the implication here is teach them the knowledge of deen. Now, every one of us, can I have you close those doors at the back? There's too much noise coming in. Both of those doors, close it. Time is a serious issue for us. We don't have time. The men are working long shifts, come back in the evening, they're exhausted. Many people don't have the strength to learn something or to teach something. But if we think about it just a little bit more, isn't that unfair with ourselves? All of this effort that we exerted, no doubt, it is to earn an honest living, to put bread and butter on the table for our dear ones, to build a future for our family. It's all valid. But don't you see a bit of an imbalance here? Where all of the effort and all of the energy is being devoted just to our physical well-being? Shouldn't there be some effort for our own personal advancement, our own spiritual progress in our own knowledge, in our own deen? يا خادم الجسم كم تشقى لخدمته أتطلب الربح بما فيه خسران انهض إلى الروح فاستكمل فضائلها فأنت بالروح لا بالجسم إنسان. He says, oh, he who is slaving after himself, his body, his physical needs, how you tire yourself, how you exhaust yourself to fulfill those physical needs. He said, are you trying to live life like this and hope to have gained after all of this? You're trying to gain through something that's actually making you lose? Of course, Earning halal is important. Taking care of our family is important. But that's not the end of life. That's not where it all comes to an end and that's it. If I do that, I'm excused, exempted from everything else. No. I still have to make myself a better person. I still have to improve my akhlaq. I still have to correct my iman. I still have to correct my ibadat, my worships. I still have to correct my dealings. I still have to learn whether the way I'm earning is correct or not. I still have to learn the huquq of others upon me. These are also part of obligations. And if I don't do that, I'm an incomplete person. So he says, inhad ila ruh. Think about your soul for a minute. The everlasting aspect of your existence. The body is a temporary aspect. فَاسْتَكْمِلْ فَضَائِلَهَا. Just like you are trying to complete and gain the wonderful possessions of this world, you should also try to complete and obtain the beautiful possessions of the soul. The sifat, the qualities of the ruh, ilm, akhlaq, patience, love, generosity, humility. Adorn yourself with these. Because he says, أَنْتَ بِالْرُوحِ لَا بِالْجِسْمِ إِنسَانُ. It's your soul that makes you a human being, not your body. It's that inner thinking. It's the spirit that makes you a human being. You have the spirit of a human being, that's why you're a human being. Not because you have the body of a human being. There are many people who have the bodies of human beings, but they have the souls of things, creatures worse than animals. What happened to our dear brother just the other day, Kareem? This brother used to come and attend our halaqah. May Allah have mercy on him. He's going to play soccer and he's coming home. Kids trying to rob him. Who are they? Scum of the earth. Drug addicts. Punks. When he doesn't have anything to give them and he resists, they start beating him savagely. And they beat him to a pulp. They don't leave a single bone in his body intact. Beating him with baseball bats until his body is smashed to pieces. These details were given to me by members of our community who actually went to the hospital and spent those last couple of days there. And they said that there is no way you could say that this face is the face of a human being. It had been beaten so badly. So you have the body of a human being and the character of an animal. You're not one of us. You're something else. You're a beast. Deen and the knowledge of deen makes us true human beings. And if you want a definition of a true human being, look towards the Sahaba. They were the best of this ummah. Their akhlaq were the best. Their actions were the best. And their knowledge was the best. We need to start connecting with that generation of Muslims. So I was talking about knowledge. It's not fair that all of our time, no matter how busy and how many commitments we have, at the end of the day, this body is going to go into the dirt and that's it, it's going to decompose. This soul travels on. How did my soul, my spirit evolve and gain and grow and progress? What did it do? What was the condition of my heart when I left this world? Every Muslim needs to take out time. You owe it to yourself to give yourself that time where you're building yourself. You're growing from inside. You're growing as a mu'min, as a believer, as a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, there could be many potential excuses, but you and I can defeat those excuses. We can take out some time every single day to learn deen. And we can take out some time every single day to impart at least the basics of deen with our family. Most of the kids growing up in our communities, honestly, the family is the only source where they will truly learn something. where they will truly learn ethics and character, where they will truly learn morals, where they will get that foundation that's going to stay with them till they die. And if we don't provide it, if we don't have that environment in our families, and all of it is just to fill their bellies, all of our effort and time is for that, we haven't done justice, brothers. Something is still missing from this picture. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum had this understood. And another thing, it was not tolerated that there be a class of Muslims that keeps on learning and advancing, and then there's another class that stays in the dark. The Prophet ﷺ once, during his talk, said, مَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ لَا يَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْ جِيرَانِهِمْ وَلَا يَتَفَقَّهُونَ وَمَا بَالُ أَقْوَامٍ لَا يُفَقِّهُونَ جِيرَانَهُمْ وَلَا يُعَلِّمُونَهُم. What's wrong with some people? They have neighbors who are well versed and educated. They don't learn from them. They have people around them who know quite a bit, but they don't go and learn from them. And what is wrong with some people? That they don't learn, they don't teach, they don't take out the time to teach and educate their neighbors. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave a very staunch warning. لَيُعَلِّمَنَّ أَقْوَامٌ جِيرَانَهُمْ وَلَا يُفَقِّهُنَّهُمْ وَلَا يَعِظُنَّهُمْ وَلَا يَأْمُرُنَّهُمْ وَلَا يَنْهَوُنَّهُمْ أَوْ لَأُعَاجِلَنَّهُمُ الْعُقُوبَةَ فِي الدُّنْيَا. These people better shape up. They better start teaching their neighbors, making them understand, giving them advice, ordering them to do good, forbid them from evil, encouraging and motivating them. Otherwise, I'm going to punish them. So when the Sahaba got together after this talk, they said, who was he referring to? They all agreed that the Prophet ﷺ was referring to a tribe called the Ash'ariyin. And Ash'ariyin were a group of people, were a tribe of people that had advanced very quickly in deen after accepting Islam. You may have heard the name of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anhu. This is the man the Prophet ﷺ used to stand behind him and listen to his tilawat of the Quran. He is the one that the Prophet ﷺ said, لَقَدْ أُوتِيتَ مِزْمَارًا مِنْ مَزَامِيرِ آلِ دَاوُدْ. You have a voice as beautiful as that of Dawood alayhi salam. And this is that tribe about which the Prophet ﷺ says, as Imam Muslim has narrated, in a chapter exclusively in praise of this tribe. Says that I know where these Ash'aris live at nighttime. At nighttime I can tell which homes belong to the people of this tribe, even though I haven't seen them entering those homes in the daytime. How is that possible? The Prophet ﷺ says, I know their houses because I hear the tilawat of Quran coming from those houses. I know this has to be Ash'ari. So they had advanced. They had advanced, but they had not taken others along with them. My respected brothers and sisters, what I am suggesting is let us at least get our families on one platform. It's not fair. It really isn't fair that we spend our whole life just worrying about bills and earnings and buying this, paying for this, and getting rid of this loan or taking that loan. Sometimes when we sit together with our families, it's like this is all we talk about. And yes, sometimes these are very important and urgent issues that we do need to talk about. But this is not the essence of life. There is no flavor to life unless there is knowledge in that life. If we spend our whole lives doing this, and we don't give enough time to learning our deen, we are living very bland and tasteless lives. So let us sit down for a minute with our families and try to come up with some solution to this problem. There needs to be learning and teaching happening in every house. There has to be. It's not fair if it's any other way. Some families have a very good child who has learned a lot about deen, let that child be the catalyst. It doesn't matter if you're small. Some have a very knowledgeable father. Some have a very knowledgeable mother. Some don't have anyone knowledgeable. Okay, let's all sit down and learn. If we have children that are going to madrasas, children that are becoming hufaz or ulama, if you don't benefit from them, it's your loss. It's a big loss. If you have time, or even if you don't have time, take out time and learn from them. It's only going to benefit you. So, in the time of Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, there was a constant effort and struggle. No one stopped. There was never this pause. Abu Ayyub Ansari radiallahu anhu, who was a very senior Sahabi, he travels all the way to Egypt to meet Uqba ibn Amr radiallahu anhu to ask him about one hadith. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu travels from Medina all the way to Sham to meet Abdullah ibn Unais radiallahu anhu just to learn one hadith. Umar radiallahu anhu sees a man entering into Medina. He sees that his clothing is all covered with dust and he looks tired, exhausted. He says, okay, this is a traveler. Where are you coming from? He says, I'm coming from Sham. I'm coming from Syria. He says, really, what has brought you to Medina? He said, I came to learn the tashahhud in salat. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, I hope and I expect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this one act of yours, your coming here, is a source of the forgiveness of all your previous sins. One Sahabi comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to ask him a question. He says, where are you coming from? He says, I'm coming from such and such place. Why have you come? I came to learn something from you. The Prophet ﷺ tells him that every stone and every clod of earth that you pass by has made dua for you. Every creature in the heavens, in the earth, in the waters makes dua for someone who is seeking knowledge. So why don't we all decide from today that we will all become seekers of knowledge? If we decide from today, believe me, Allah will open up the doors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up the doors. The Prophet ﷺ used to ask Allah, beg Allah for al-ilm an-nafi', that knowledge which is beneficial. Beneficial means it is a source of salvation in akhirah. Not just ma'lumat, having lots and lots of data and information and things you can talk about and things you can relate. No, actual knowledge of how to do things. How things have to be done in the proper way. What are the sunnahs? The greatest knowledge after Quran is the knowledge of the sunnah. And sunnah, remember, is something that is learned so that it can be practiced. It is not something that is learned so that it can be stored in the back of our mind. That, oh yeah, we know the Prophet ﷺ did this. And that's it. Sunnah is learned to be implemented. At-tariqa al-masnukatu fi din. That way which is adopted in deen is called sunnah. And when we look at sunnah as something, is just, do I have to do this or is it just sunnah? This is how we ask, do I need to pray that or is it just sunnah? Do I need to do this or is it just sunnah? You've taken the wrong approach to sunnah. Who told you sunnah is something you don't have to do? There will be many people on the Day of Judgment whose salvation will be because of this sunnah. And there will be many people who will be rejected at the fountain of Kawthar because of their rejecting the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to acquire knowledge as the Sahaba radiallahu anhum acquired knowledge. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to implement this knowledge the way Sahaba radiallahu anhum implemented it. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to keep this process of learning and practicing and teaching within our own lives until our very last day. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه.